So morning, afternoon, evening, they all roll into one and during this COVID-19 lockdown. My name's Rob. I'm a member of Living Springs Church in Cannock. And as part of the 10 question series, we thought it's about time Adam had a taste of his own medicine. So Adam, introduce yourself and tell us something about your journey to faith for everyone watching or listening to this.
Well, thanks, Rob, and for putting me in the hot seat. My journey to faith, I wasn't born into a Christian church-going family. My mum and dad both live in London, which is where I was born, and my dad was a policeman. And I used to go to Sunday school sometimes. I was involved in scouting, so we had things like church parade, but certainly wouldn't say I was a Christian. Growing up, I always thought that, if there was a God, my good would outweigh my bad, and so I would be okay. And I can remember one day sitting at the back of the Methodist church at Scout Parade, actually having that thought, but went through life, did all the kind of things that you did when you were in your 18, 19, 20, went to Ibiza and all of those kind of things. But eventually I met Ruth, and Ruth would go on to be my wife, and we would get married. And Ruth's dad was a Baptist minister, and he was nagging Ruth to go back to church. She'd grown up in church, was just a bit backslidden, I guess it's fair to say. And a little while before we got married, she wanted to start to go to church. And so my plan was to get Ruth settled in a church and then let her go there on a Sunday morning, and I would lay in and watch football and all of that stuff. We looked at a few churches, and then where we were living in London in an area called Erith, we found a little Baptist church, and we went, and I haven't stopped going to church since then. And it was good fun, and I really enjoyed it, but I was just kind of struck by the love that the people had for me and Ruth, and the care that they showed us. And over a period, I'm not one of these people that remembers dates. I just kind of began to question things. And one of the questions I was always looking to answer was, is there more to life than this? And I found that there was more to life than this. And it was through the ministry of that Baptist church, I became a Christian. I gave my life to Jesus. Things didn't change massively quickly for me, in the sense of, I stopped all the stupid things I was doing, but over time, I've certainly been transformed by Jesus, and it was the best thing I have ever done.
So when and how did you know that you were going to be called into the ministry? Wow.
Quite early on in my journey at the Baptist church, I was somebody that was always a doer. I could do things, and probably too soon they asked me to become a deacon at the Baptist church, and I did that and was happy to do that. I did that for a few years, enjoyed that, but never thought that anything else would happen. And then through various circumstances, we ended up moving from London to the Midlands, and we started going to a church called Hope Church in Corby. We actually went on its second week. It was a church plant, and we enjoyed it. We were going to a Baptist church at the time in a neighbouring town, but we wanted to go to church closer to where we lived, and so we spoke to our minister and said, look, we want to finish our responsibilities here, come to go to this church in Corby. And so we did that. And then one Sunday, Damien, the minister there, was preaching, and he said, if there's anybody who feels that they might have a call of God on their life to kind of go into ministry, into leadership, I'd like you to come forward afterwards and be prayed for. And I just felt, yeah, maybe that was. And I was a debt collector at the time, so it was a bit of a change. And I remember I went forward, and Damien and one of I think he was a finance officer at the time, a gentleman called Andy, prayed for me. And I kind of thought, well, yeah, maybe I do want to go into ministry. And so I didn't do anything straight away with it, other than I decided that just in case I was going to go into ministry, I probably should have some kind of theological training. And so I started a distance learning degree with Regent's Theological College, which is Elam's college. and so I started a degree in theology, and did that for a while. The church asked me to come along and work for the church after a period of time as what they called a community pastor. It would be a community worker, but still wasn't ordained ministry. And then I'd been wrestling with whether or not I should apply to Elim to become a minister, and I went to Malvern and just wrestled with it. Just wasn't sure. Was, I guess, a little nervous, maybe even scared about doing it. And then I remember the place on the side of the Malvern Hills where God said, "Why have you not put your application in?" I'd filled in the application form, but I hadn't put it in. And
Were you scared Ruth was going to throttle you then?
No, Ruth was on board by this point. And I remember being on the side of the Malvern Hills, and God said, "I've got your back. Don't worry. Put the application in." And so I did. And kind of the rest is history, and worked through my training and my probation period, and became an ordained Elim minister in 2016.
So, do you have a favourite book of the Bible, and if so, why?
Oh, you see, now I normally get to ask this question, and
I was expecting you to just come straight out with Amos.
I did think about that, because I do like Amos, and then I thought, but is it my favourite book of the Bible? And the reason I like Amos is mainly because I think it's Amos 5 verse 24, which talks about justice rolling like a river, or that's a really bad paraphrase of a powerful verse. But I love social action, social justice, and things like that. And so I would say, yes, I like Amos, but actually any part of the Bible that talks about social justice is good for me. And one of the Bibles, you can buy all these Bibles, they're fire Bibles and all that kind of things about, the Holy, more of an emphasis on the Holy Spirit and all that. And one of the first Bibles I bought was a Bible called the Poverty Bible, and it kind of went into more detail around how God's concern for the poor and stuff like that. So I'm not going to say I have one favourite book, because I think I change my mind every now and then, but certainly I'm drawn to Amos and things like that.
Not James then, where he tells it as it is.
I like James, but I find myself just, I like a lot, but on any given day I may have a different answer.
So tell us a little about the ministry you've done so far with Corby and the different places you've been, and then tell us about Living Springs Cannock.
Yeah, so as I say, our introduction to Elim was at this little church. Well, there was a little church plant at the time in Corby called Hope Church, and so that was our experience. We were fortunate enough to be there right at the start of it, and we saw that church grow from the kind of 50 or 60 people that were there on the very first week. Some of those were just kind of like people who'd come to see the church launch and stuff like that. But we joined, and as I say, after a little while, I went on to staff with the church, and so I was the community pastor. So during that time, I set up the Corby Food Bank and a CAP debt centre through Hope Church, and they were great. We finished the CAP centre probably after two or 3 years. We found that really it was great work, and our privilege of seeing some of our clients come to know Jesus and baptised and all of those things. But that was hard work. But the Corby Food Bank was something that I really embraced as well and led that. And that's still going to this day. It's now not run by Hope Church. It's been passed on to another church when I left. But I was there, so I was the community pastor. Then I went into applied for ministry, and that coincided with the church kind of outgrowing the rented building it was in. And so the plan, the leadership decided that we would launch a second site, a second campus of Hope Church. And so myself and Ruth were asked to go and lead that, and that was called Hope West. And we went and led that for 2 years. It was hard work. We saw some growth, we saw some people leave, and after 2 years, the decision was made that it was just like putting too much strain on all the church teams, and we would come back together as one church. So that happened. I came back to the main church, All the time I've been on the leadership of both and helping Damien oversee both, but I came back really into the Hope Church as a main thing, and was the assistant pastor there, and then the associate pastor once I became ordained. A lot of day-to-day responsibility we had quite a big staff, so I looked after those. And then I started to develop a bit of a love and a bit of a interest in the social media side of church. I did something called Hope Bites, which was a daily morning devotional, and worked on the social media side of things, still running the food bank and other things like that. And then just felt God say it's time to leave. A gentleman who we've interviewed on this program called Mark Ryan, I blame him solely for this. He was doing some mentoring with me, and he said to me, if you get to the age of 60 and you haven't led a church, how will you feel? And that thought rattled around in my brain cell for a good few months. And one summer, I had a chat with Damien, and I said, I think, Damien, it's time for me to go on the stationing list to maybe go and lead a church on my own, and or to lead a church. And so I went on the stationing list, and the way Elim do it is the way they do it. And I came up with Ruth to meet Nigel and Paul, who were looking after the church here in Cannock, and was interviewed. And within the first 10 or 15 minutes, me and Ruth both knew this was where we were meant to be. We just felt that there was massive potential here. We hadn't met anybody else, so we didn't know about the people, but the people are great. But we just felt there was massive potential. And we liked Nigel and Paul. And I remember we came up on a Friday evening for the interview, and we were going out for dinner with them, and as we were walking to the car, we looked at each other and went, yeah, if they ask, we're coming. We just felt it was that strong. So I've been here a year and 4 months now, and it's been crazy. It's been great, been exciting. We've seen growth. Loving it. The situation we're in now has changed everything again, but it's been great seeing the church grow. It's probably very nearly double the size it was when we got here, and working with a great team of people as well.
Yeah. So who has influenced you the most in your ministry aside from Jesus?
Oh, there's a lot of people. The person most responsible for me becoming a Christian was two people. So from that sense, there was a guy called Joe who was on the door at the church where I was saved. And Joe was an old gentleman, probably in his 80s when I met him. Was in a lot of pain from an injury from the war, and but he loved Jesus. He knew where he was going. And Joe passed away whilst we were at the church, but he was so secure in his faith, and so secure that his wife would get to see him again in heaven. And so his peace in that situation really helped me, and so he had a great influence. The minister there, Julie, a lady who led me to the Lord, a significant influence, still in touch with her to this day. And it would be remiss and definitely wrong of me not to say Damien, the minister in Corby. And then Mark.
Sure, Paul, your best mate, Carlsberg mates.
Yeah, but Paul's
on that list.
Yeah, he's there. We work with each other, but from a leadership point of view, definitely Damien, and then Mark at Birmingham Christian Church has had a big influence on my life in leadership as well.
So what's the most challenging thing about your role outside of the COVID-19 situation?
Outside of the COVID-19 situation. I think it's wanting to be further along than we are now, and wanting things done like yesterday. I'm a real kind of charge at it person, and understanding that sometimes that isn't the best thing. So reining myself in, I think that's it. And I've come from a big church. It was, say, nearly 300, I think, when I left Corby, to a small church, and not having a team, a paid staff around to help. That's been a big challenge. That's been a big culture shock for me over the year and a half I've been here. But I would say just kind of reining myself in is probably my biggest challenge.
Taking too much on then.
Probably, yeah.
What's the most enjoyable thing that you do in your current role? And is it studying prophecy with me, or is it Poppy the Pug ministry? You let a puppy?
Yeah, I see that you've amended the questions. I didn't read that bit on it when you sent it back. What's the most enjoyable? I love seeing people grow. I love introducing people to Jesus, and we've had the privilege over the year and a half of doing that here and seeing people. But for me, people growing in their leadership giftings, people stepping out, taking chances is the best thing. And so that's really what I enjoy doing. I'm loving, interacting with you and studying prophecy and pug ministry. That's just my little secret, which is now out there. So Poppy the Pug is in ministry with me. But yeah, I think just seeing people grow in leadership and in Christ is my most enjoyable thing.
Good. If you could go back in time to when you started out in ministry then, not that long ago then, what piece of advice would you give to yourself? And don't say not to take too much on.
I think it is around that area. Know your limitations. Be a bit kinder to myself. I think I'm my own worst critic, and to keep, just to remember some of those things. So I would say to myself, don't criticize yourself. Don't be your own worst critic, and remember that God said He's got your back, which is what He said to me on the side of that hill. And so it would be that. And then, one of the things, listen to people. Oh yeah, that would be it. Listen to people who've been there before you. Because I remember starting in Corby, I became the community pastor thing, and I said to them, I went to the leadership, said, right, we're going to start a Cat Debt Centre and the food bank all within the space of 6 months of each other. And they all kind of, no, that's too much. I said, I'll be fine. You pay me to do this. And I should have listened to them, nearly killed me. So yeah, listen, seek wisdom, as the Proverbs would say.
Moving on from the current situation then, what challenges and opportunities do you see for the local church?
So within this situation, I think the opportunity is we've got a very captive audience at the moment, in the sense that the vast majority of people are stuck at home, searching the internet, searching Facebook, looking for things. So I think if we can take the opportunity of being relevant, of engaging with people, of being real, of looking after people, of caring for people, then COVID-19 presents us with that opportunity. But I think the challenge is staying connected, is staying connected to those people who don't have the internet. So the makeup of Living Springs is that there are a portion of people who don't have smartphones, who don't use the internet, mainly due to age. And so we need to make sure we stay in contact with them. So lots of challenges. And the challenge as well, one of the things that's been really kind of bugging me for the last few days is not knowing when this is going to be over, and not knowing, when some element of being able to be the gathered church is going to come back.
Look forward to that day then.
Yeah.
We've seen the Archbishop of Canterbury's Easter message reach 10 times the normal amount of people, as you were saying, with the captive audience and searching through the internet, and Spring Harvest reach over 1 million people with their week's worth of teaching. My life group which has been online, is growing as well. So you've been building the YouTube channel for the church, and you're doing your daily thought and proverbs. So do you think when all this is over, we'll go back to doing church the same way, or we've just completely changed now?
I think, and this is a a question where I could become quite controversial, so and I'm not going to hold back, but I think there's a lot of things that we did pre-COVID-19 that were brilliant. There's a lot of pros to how we did church before, but I don't think we can afford to go back to the way we were. I don't think, and what I mean by that is I don't think we can look at the internet, look at YouTube, look at Facebook, look at Instagram, look at Twitter, look at all of those things and go back to treating them how we were before. We were, as a church, we would live stream our Sunday service, and that was probably about it. We would dabble with Facebook, but putting posts up. But I think now, local church, Living Springs, and probably as a global church, we need to seriously think a little bit more about what online church looks like, how we can lead people through their journey, what the next steps are for people online. I think that is the area that we can't afford to ignore it, because a lot of people, will have spent a lot of time over these last 3 or 4 weeks, and to some extent some money in being able to bring the Sunday service online and all that. And we shouldn't just kind of throw that all away when things start to go back to normal, because there's every possibility this will happen again. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a unique problem. It may not happen for 10 years. It may not happen for 20 years, but something's going to come along where we're going to end up locked down again. I think, for us to say this will never happen again is probably wrong. So I don't think we should go back to the way we do things. I think we may use this time to see a few things not come back when we go back. So some things may not restart. And this just may be in the nudge that we needed from God to do that.
So to end with then, Adam, in true mastermind style, I've started, so I'll let you finish this. Can you give us a word of encouragement or vision or message of how we'll do outreach going forward for Living Springs Cannock?
I think we need to be prepared for a real growth, and I say that because I think I don't know where COVID-19 came from. Some people say, well, it's from Satan or all of that stuff. I'm not going to weigh into that debate. But if it was Satan, I think he overplayed his hand here, and I think that he tried to silence the church, and the church has just found a way around that to defeat that. And so I think in Cannock, we're going to look to embrace that. We're going to look to embrace online church. We're going to look to embrace when we're back together, what that looks like. And rather than them be separate things, because I think in the past when people have done online church and when I've done online ministry, they've almost been two separate things. They've been kind of a different thing each time. I want to try and make them very similar in the sense that the welcome, the way people feel when they're online should be mirrored by what they would get when they came to church on a Sunday as well. And so I think we're going to do things a lot differently, but I think the opportunity is amazing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.